Saturday mornings on my property are usually quiet enough that I can hear frogs shifting under cattails. That's why I headed down to the lake early, holding my father's dented steel mug and a small tackle box. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. It's just a peaceful, solo fishing trip before the day warmed up. Halfway down the gravel trail, I heard voices. Loud ones. Not the kind of voices that belong to people quietly enjoying nature, but the kind that announce themselves like they're entitled to the space around them. I reached the clearing by the water and stopped dead in my tracks. 6 strangers were on my dock, piling into my aluminum boat like they'd paid for a rental. One guy tossed his cooler in the bow. Another woman adjusted a bright orange vest and tapped the outboard like she was checking her own gear. The man with the gray beard stood with 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot already on the boat, like he was leading an expedition. For a second I thought I might be dreaming. But then I saw the oak posts I installed by hand, the knots in the cedar planks, the stain I brushed on myself. This was my dock, my boat, my lake. The only thing missing was the courtesy to ask permission. I took a slow breath, walked closer, and kept my voice calm. Morning. What are you all doing on my boat? The bearded guy blinked like he'd just been caught sneaking cookies out of a jar. Oh, we're with the neighborhood group. Karen said we could use it. Before I could ask who Karen was, the woman herself appeared, powder blue windbreaker, clipboard tucked under her arm, sunglasses pushed up like a crown she thought she deserved. Her walk carried the confidence of someone who believed titles were the same thing as ownership. She nodded toward the boat. It's fine. This lake is part of the community. Everyone has access. She said it like a declaration, not an opinion. I tightened my grip on my mug. This lake isn't part of any community. It's on my private land. That dock and that boat aren't public. She folded her arms, jaw clenching. You can't restrict HOA members from a shared amenity. I'm not in your HOA. Her eyebrows shot up, like the idea had never crossed her mind. You don't get to opt out of community features. I didn't opt out, I said. My property simply isn't included. The guests shifted uncomfortably. One couple stepped back toward the trail, whispering, Karen, are you sure? The woman with the vest asked quietly. Even her tone carried doubt now. Karen didn't flinch. She stepped closer to me instead, speaking slower, sharper. You may think you own this water, but we voted to designate it for shared recreation. I lifted my phone and pulled up a digital copy of the county map. The road marks the end of your HOA boundary. My property line starts past that ridge. This lake sits more than 300 feet outside your development. Didn't even look. That map doesn't override board approval. I stared at her in disbelief. You don't get voting rights on land you don't own. Her nostrils flared, and she snatched the wooden sign I installed next to the dock private lake keep off, ripped it clean from the post, and tossed it into the grass like a piece of trash. This sign is invalid. Community access overrides personal preference. A quiet heat spread across my chest. Not explosive anger, just something sharp and measured. I glanced upward at the security camera mounted on a pine limb. The little red recording light blinked. It caught every second. The bearded man finally stepped out of the boat, palms raised. Look, we don't want trouble. We just came to fish. Nobody told us this was private, another guest echoed him. We honestly thought the HOA owned it. We'll go. They headed toward their cars one by one, apologizing under their breath. None of them met her eyes on the way out. Karen watched them leave, jaw twitching like she couldn't stand being abandoned. Then she turned back to me. You'll be hearing from our legal team. This behavior violates community values. I stayed silent. No shouting. No arguing. Just a stillness that said I wasn't intimidated. Her eyes flickered. Too fast. Like she was thinking several moves ahead, and none of them involved backing down, when she finally stormed off. Gravel spitting under her tires, I picked up the wooden sign and brushed dirt off the edges. The wood was scratched, but still usable. I walked back to my house, set the sign on my workbench, and opened my laptop. I dialed my attorney, a calm, detail-oriented guy named Daniel, who handled rural land disputes for a living. "Daniel, I need to run something by you," I said when he picked up. "A group from a nearby HOA tried to take my boat this morning. Their president tore down my private access sign and said they voted to claim the lake." He paused. "You have this on video?" "Every second." "Good," he said. "Don't confront her again. Let her escalate. Document everything. People who overreach usually make their own mistakes." I looked out the window, toward the water. The mist was almost gone now. The sun had warmed the lake just enough that you could see tiny waves tapping the shoreline. "This isn't over, is it?" "No," he said gently. "But that's not a bad thing. It's easier to win when they push harder." I hung up and noted the time in a folder labeled HOA Incident, Lake Dispute, date, time, number of trespassers, damage to property. Recorded footage, not because I wanted a fight, because fights are easier to win when you arrive with evidence instead of anger. Monday morning felt quiet, almost too quiet, after what happened at the lake. I brewed coffee in my father's old steel mug, opened the sliding porch door, and sat down with a clear view of the water. I was expecting peace. Instead, I opened my inbox and found a subject line that shifted everything. Subject urgent. Community access issue. It was from the HOA president. The same woman in the powder blue windbreaker. She had emailed the entire neighborhood. Residents. A property owner is interfering with our long-standing community access to the lake. This violates shared neighborhood standards. The board will take legal action to restore access. There it was. She wasn't just denying facts, she was rewriting the narrative. Publicly, I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to Daniel, my attorney, and typed a short line above it. She started. "Sometimes the strongest move is silence." Within an hour, replies started rolling in from other residents. One guy wrote, "I checked the county plats. That lake isn't in the HOA boundary." Another, "Why threaten legal action without confirming ownership? Isn't that dangerous?" A third, "We don't want to pay for a lawsuit over land that isn't ours." I stared at the screen, surprised. Truth has a way of attracting people, even when you don't argue for it. Still, I didn't engage. You never look defensive when you let evidence speak for you. By late afternoon, another email appeared, this time with an attachment. She quoted HOA bylaws, Article 6, Section 4. All natural bodies of water adjacent to community boundaries may be regarded as shared amenities. It sounded official. Until I opened the attached PDF, there was no definition of boundaries. "Convenient ambiguity," I replied calmly. "Attached certified parcel map plus survey. The lake is outside HOA limits. Confirm records before further claims." 12 words. No emotion. Just documentation. That evening, while I grilled on the back porch, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A steady, older voice spoke. "Cameron, you don't know me personally. My name's Robert Hastings. I've lived here since the subdivision was built." He sounded frustrated, not hostile. "I heard from someone on the board that Karen is planning a closed meeting. She wants people to claim the lake has been used by residents for years. If she can establish historical access, she thinks she can force an easement." The air felt heavier. "So she's not mistaken," I said. "She's building evidence." Robert sighed. "She's trying to create it. Be ready." I thanked him and ended the call. The lake looked calm from where I stood, but I could feel the storm brewing under the surface. The next morning, I checked my mailbox. A crisp envelope with an official-looking header. Lakewood Pines Legal Committee opened it. Cease interference with community access. Known compliance will incur fines of $500 per day. Formal tone. Legal structure. threatening language. But I noticed three things. Instantly, no attorney name, no state bar number, no registered law firm. It wasn't legal counsel, it was theater. I scanned the letter and sent it to Daniel. His response came fast. This isn't from an attorney. It's fraudulent. Keep it. It's evidence. I slipped the printed letter into a folder already labeled HOA dispute evidence. Daniel drafted a formal cease and desist the next day, citing state coda referencing deed documentation quorum. Boundary valided tide mending the HOA. Stop misrepresenting ownership and no threats. No emotional language. Just law. We sent it via certified mail for recorded delivery. That evening, I sat outside, watching the lake fade from gold to gray as the sun dropped. The breeze rattled the grasses along the shoreline. It felt different, now not peaceful, but purposeful. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for proof. People like Karen operated on confidence, not facts. They believed authority equals ownership. They assumed no one would question them. But confidence collapses under documentation. I lifted my mug and took a slow sip. Daniel's voice replayed in my mind. Don't push. Let her escalate. She'll build the case for us. I didn't need to win with volume. I just needed to record everything. Asterisk, by Thursday morning, the situation felt less like a neighborhood disagreement and more like a legal chess match. The sky was overcast, a thin layer of mist hovering over the lake, like it didn't want to pick sides. I sat at my desk organizing files on a USB drive when my phone buzzed again. It was Robert. She held the closed meeting last night, he said. I couldn't attend, but one of the members recorded it. Virginia's one-party consent, so it's legal. My pulse kicked up a notch. What did they say? He exhaled sharply. She wants board members to claim the lake has been a shared community space for years. She's trying to manufacture a usage history. There it was. Not confusion. Calculated intent. Send me the recording, I said. 5 minutes later, I plugged in my headphones and hit play. Karen's voice came through loud and sharp. If we can document consistent past usage, we can claim implicit easement. He won't be able to shut the gate on us. A male board member pushed back. We've never used that lake. It wasn't part of the development when the HOA formed. Karen's tone turned icy. We will create the record. I'm already in discussions with the developer. They're offering a significant sum for exclusive access rights. Silence. Then another voice, how much? Karen replied, confident and calm. $340,000. I paused the recording. Not only was she claiming access to my lake, she was trying to sell rights that didn't exist. That wasn't overreach. It was fraud. I forwarded the audio to Daniel with one sentence. She's trying to profit from it. He called almost immediately. If she's negotiating a sale, we'll need documentation. You can subpoena the developer if this reaches county level. That's where this is headed, I said. Daniel paused. Good. Let her keep talking. Criminal intent is easier to prove when the offender thinks they're winning. The next day, I drove to the county surveyor's office, a small brick building that smelled like coffee and dust. A woman named Elaine Marsh, a senior surveyor with decades of experience, spread out maps across a wooden table. She traced the boundary lines with a pen. Your lot predates the HOA by several years, she said. Their boundary stops at Evergreen Road. The lake sits fully on your parcel with a buffer of roughly 340 feet. I asked how soon I could get a certified report. By the end of the week, she said. Stamped and sealed. I thanked her and left, feeling like someone had tightened a bolt that had been loose for days. That evening, I received an email from a burner address. No text. Just a PDF attachment labeled Preliminary Access Agreement, Lakewood Pines. HOA plus Sterling Development Group. Opened it, dated 3 weeks earlier, signed by Karen. The document proposed granting the developer exclusive lake access rights in exchange for $340,000. Contingent on establishing historical community usage or legal easement. My breath caught. She wasn't speculating. She had already been negotiating the sale before ever stepping onto my dock. I forwarded it to Daniel. His reply was instant. We have enough for a formal filing. 2 days later, Daniel submitted a petition to the county board, including Property DGI's parcel map surveyor, certification fake legal letter HOA board recording preliminary contract. This wasn't a property dispute anymore. It was a documented attempt to sell land she didn't own. The county scheduled a hearing. October 28th, 9 a.m., when word spread. The neighborhood split in two. Some residents emailed me privately, "Thank you for defending your rights. This could have cost us all." Others murmured in meetings, embarrassed they had followed her leadership so blindly. Karen stopped sending public emails, stopped waving to neighbors, stopped jogging her usual route. Powerful people go silent when the truth stops bending. The night before the hearing, I went to check the dock. The sign I had repaired earlier was covered in red spray paint. Community Lake HOA access. I checked the footage from my security camera. A dark SUV pulled up at 2:41 a.m. Someone stepped out, hood up, and spray painted the sign. I zoomed in on the plates. It was Karen's vehicle. Downloaded the footage and sent it to Daniel. His response was simple. Bring the sign to the hearing. Leave the paint on. The law doesn't just punish fraud, it punishes vandalism too. That night, sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and watched the moon reflect across the water. The lake didn't care about politics or egos or boundary maps, it just existed. But sometimes peace requires defending. I thought back to Daniel's first advice. Don't escalate. Let her do it for you. He was right. I didn't win by shouting. I won by documenting. October 28th arrived, cold and bright. The kind of morning where frost clings to fallen leaves before sunlight melts it away. I parked outside the county administration building 15 minutes early. Holding a folder thick with evidence, the sign Karen vandalized sat in the back of my truck. Red paint still splashed across the wood like a confession written in anger. Daniel met me at the entrance, carrying a laptop bag and a calm expression only lawyers or surgeons seem to have. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. More than she is. We walked inside. The hearing room was already packed. Residents filled rows like they were attending a town election. Some familiar faces waved. Others looked away, embarrassed they ever believed Karen's story. Across the aisle, Karen sat stiffly next to her attorney, a tall man in a navy suit. She looked smaller than I remembered, hands folded in her lap. Sunglasses perched on her head, though we were indoors. She didn't look at me. She barely blinked. The board supervisor, Marilyn Hayes, called the room to order. This hearing concerns property rights involving Lakewood Pines, HOA, and Mr. Cameron Reed. The objective is to determine ownership and legal access. Authority. She gestured toward Daniel. "Mr. Hale, you may present." Daniel stood, walked to the projector, and began with the simplest truth. Land records. He pulled up the deed survey. This document shows Cameron Reed purchased parcel 11B, including a 4-acre lake, 8 months before Lakewood Pines HOA existed. Maps appeared on the screens behind him. He layered the county GIS map on top of the original survey. The HOA boundary stops at County Road 614. The lake sits entirely outside jurisdiction, with a 340-foot buffer. The board members nodded. No confusion, no gray area. Next, he displayed images of Karen ripping down my sin. Frame by frame, this footage shows the HOA president removing posted private property warnings, Murmurs ran through the room. He played the audio recording from the closed board. Meeting. Karen's voice echoed through the speakers. If we create a usage record, we can force an easement. I'm negotiating a deal worth $340,000. The room erupted. People whispered, gasped, shook their heads. Karen stared down at the table. Jaw locked. Daniel transitioned to the PDF. This is the preliminary contract between the HOA president and Sterling Development Group. She attempted to sell rights. She did not possess. He paused long enough for silence to become heavier. This is fraud, not misunderstanding. Karen's attorney finally stood. He cleared his throat. Adjusting his tie, Ms. Aldridge acted under the belief that the lake had historical community usage. She made an error in interpretation. Supervisor Hayes leaned forward. A clerical misunderstanding doesn't produce a signed financial contract. Do you have any documentation supporting her belief? His silence was answer enough. Supervisor Hayes turned to me. Double quotes, Mr. Reed? Do you wish to make a statement? I stood slowly. I didn't bring this here to embarrass anyone or punish a neighborhood, I said. I just wanted to enjoy the property I legally purchased. Every step I took was documented, not driven by emotion. My rights don't depend on someone else's vote. Quiet hush settled over the room. People listened, not as neighbors, as witnesses. Supervisor Hayes consulted with the other board members, then lifted her microphone. After reviewing documentation, witness statements, and recordings, the county finds the lake is privately owned by Mr. Reed and is not subject to HOA authority. The HOA is prohibited from future claims or attempts to enforce access. She wasn't finished. We further impose a civil penalty of $15,000 for abuse of administrative power and misrepresentation. Miss Aldridge is removed from her position, effective immediately. This matter will be referred to the Commonwealth Attorney for review of potential criminal violations. The gavel struck. The decision was final. Some residents clapped. Others sat stunned. Realizing how close they came to being financially tied to a lawsuit they never agreed to, Karen stood slowly. Her attorney touching her arm, as if reminding her to breathe. Her face looked drained, like someone had pulled the structure out from under her confidence. She walked past me without a word. Staring at the floor, shoulders tight, I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. I just watched her leave outside. The crisp wind cut across the parking lot. Daniel shook my hand. You handled this exactly the way someone should, he said. What happens now? I asked. He shrugged lightly. She faced the aftermath of her decisions. You just keep doing what you're doing. Quiet, documented, lawful. I nodded and looked back toward the doors where Karen had exited.
Nice.
Minutes earlier. Some people think authority is the same as ownership. Some think leadership means power, but truth doesn't care who yells louder. It cares who has the deed. The day after the hearing, I drove back home with the windows cracked open. Cool wind cutting through the truck like a cleansing breeze. The leaves along the roadside had started to turn red and gold. Fall was settling in, but something else had settled. Too, a sense that the storm had finally passed. The lake looked untouched when I arrived. No footprints on the gravel trail, no unfamiliar tire marks, just ripples pushing softly against the dock like nothing had ever happened. For a moment, I just stood there, hands in my pockets, breathing in the quiet. It didn't feel like victory, it felt like relief. Later that week, residents from Lakewood Pines began stopping by. Some apologized. Others just wanted to hear the real story, not the one they had been told in emails. Robert was the first to knock on my door. You handled this better than most people would have, he said.
Ow.
Some folks would have fought fire with fire. You just kept receipts. I smiled a little. I wasn't trying to win a war. I was trying to keep what already belonged to me. He nodded, voice softer. And you did. Over the next few days, more neighbors reached out, some privately, some in a group chat. They weren't defending Karen anymore. They were embarrassed, They trusted authority without checking facts. People learn slow, but they learn. The following Monday, Daniel called with news. Prosecutor reviewed the case, he said. They're pursuing civil penalties. She won't see jail time, but she'll face fines, restitution, and a restriction from holding HOA authority anywhere in the state. I leaned back in my chair. She's done then. As far as influence goes, he said. Yes. There was no satisfaction in hearing it, just closure. 2 weeks later, a moving truck showed up outside Karen's house. Curtains shut, yard unkempt, mailbox empty. She didn't greet anyone, didn't say goodbye, just packed up 12 years of influence and drove away without a word. By the time the sun set, her house was listed for sale. No farewell, no apology, just disappearance. That's how people leave when the truth catches up faster than excuses. That weekend, I decided the dock needed something more than a repaired plank and a camera feed. I went to the hardware store, picked out a solid piece of oak, and carved a new sign by Hanslow. Deliberate cuts that felt more like closure than a warning. When it was finished, the letters read, Private Lake Respect Boundaries, Property Rights, MATTR. The wood had a deep walnut stain sealed to last decades. When I mounted it at the edge of the dock, the morning sun hit it just right, and it looked permanent in a way the first sign never did. Neighbors gathered behind me, a small group of 15 or so. Daniel stood off to the side, hands in his pockets. Robert leaned on a cane, nodding proudly. This isn't about keeping people away, I said. It's about reminding them that ownership means something. And for the first time since all this began, everyone there nodded in agreement. As the group dispersed, I stayed behind on the dock, watching the lake turn silver under the afternoon sky. The wind moved softly across the water, and the reflection of the tree line shimmered like a story finally settling into its last chapter. What I learned wasn't complicated. People who lead with ego always overstep. People who lead with proof never have to shout. You don't win by yelling louder than the other side. You win by documenting the truth and letting their lies collapse under their own weight. Evidence is louder than authority. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone dealing with an HOA or a neighbor who doesn't respect boundaries, it's this. Don't fight with emotion. Fight with documentation. Keep your surveys. Record your calls. Save every email. Print every file. People who think rules don't apply to them will eventually prove it themselves. You just need a folder ready when they do. I ran my hand across the new oak sign and took a final look. Across the water, the lake wasn't just mine legally. It was mine because I defended it the right way. And that made all the difference.